Hello there, and thank you for staying with the Business Today. All right, now we are getting to another conversation where we are talking about crisis management in business. And joining me is Jacob Ouma, who is the Managing Director, Ad Media Communications Limited. Welcome to Business Today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Yeah. All right, now let's get into the conversation. You know, when you sit down and start thinking about maybe wanting to start a company, you usually think about, okay, I want to start a tech company, I want to start this and this. So how did you come up with the idea of crisis management, crisis communications in a company? You just want to start a company that deals with crisis communication and management in a company?
So in our case, actually, crisis comms found us. You know, at times in business, when you start a company, you don't know which direction the market is going to lead you. Like when we started Ad Media Communication back in 2008 and incorporated in 2009, we just knew we wanted to be a strategic communication company, which we are. And over time, as we deal with our clients, you find like they have complex and diverse issues that need attention. And key among them is the crisis communication. So in the process of developing crisis communication solutions to our clients and how to go about crisis management, it became one of our biggest products. And we've been able to do it across the African continent for various organizations, the UN, the EU. We are currently doing for the ECOWAS. We are also handling the comms and PR for the Nairobi Expressway. Recently, you've seen the energy safety campaign for IPRA called Kaa Safe Mtaani. We are still the ones behind that. So all these, as much as they are communications centric, but crisis communication is one of their biggest components. We also do that for Fortune 500 companies in tech. And we give them crisis comms solutions and how to go about management of the crisis that they undergo over and above the normal strategic communication and PR that we handle for them.
Quite impressive. And now, even as we continue with this conversation, where do we usually go wrong when it comes to communication, crisis communication in a company? Because many a times something happens and then it's blown out of proportion, especially in an establishment. So what are some of the steps that need to be followed when it comes to crisis communication?
So the first thing you have to ask yourself is, are you having, do you want to manage a crisis, or you have a crisis in your management? So many people focus on the management of crisis, but you find actually the problem is the crisis of management. So you have to look at your team. How is your management comprised of? Who is part of the crisis communication team? What is the hierarchy? Because at times you find the most important stage of, any crisis is the pre-crisis stage, before the crisis actually happens. What were the sequence of activities that built up to this crisis happening? So we go back to that route and ask ourselves, like, who had this information first? How was it verified? Through which channels? And then how was it escalated and to who? And then if there is that hierarchy that has been established, is it clear to everyone within the organization that should a crisis hit you, this is the channel that is going to be established to manage this crisis? The other thing also that is important is we help our clients to brainstorm on the crisis scenarios that may get them. Like way before the Nairobi Expressway, for example, was launched, we had to sit down and ask ourselves, what kind of crisis do we expect on this project? And it goes to the minutest details. So when you drive there and you see a random, for example, a glass barrier next to a tree, and you don't know what that is, we are protecting the marabou stocks from being hit by the cars. And that is a crisis averted. So you go to the small thoughts, as in you have to think about all the crisis scenarios. Like, are you ready, for example, to launch this project? Is it good? Is everyone at par with it? How quick are the operational procedures? And how conversant are we on that? You find like the variety of clients that we work with touch on every industry. Like, I can give you an example. In the Gambia, where we have been training all senior communication government officials in communication and crisis management and crisis comms, the biggest challenge in the Gambia is the issue of migration, where many want to go to Europe and secure employments, maybe through Libya, and they are caught up. So we are equipping government to handle, in the face of this migration challenge, how do you handle the communication to make the community have a behavior change in how they do that. In the ECOWAS bloc, you have crises that have hit, for example, Burkina Faso, Mali, where they've had military coup. So we go back to the organization and equip them on how to go about the communication during this crisis. Yes, you may be equipped in managing your crisis. Internally, you have your standard operating procedures of how to go about the crisis, but how do you communicate that is being done? So we help you think through that, and we give you the tools that will help you to basically navigate that. We also support a lot in the current government, even the former government, in terms of how to go about crisis. For example, case in point, the maize subsidy project that was handled. You find the crisis there was that people didn't see where that maize was going, because they know they hear there's maize, but they don't know where it's going. So just bringing that communication to show people how this maize moves from the factory to the shelf and how it ends, and people overbuy. Basically, there's no controls on how many packets somebody can buy, and that is what brings to that crisis. So it's about analyzing our client situations, looking at the scenarios, coming up with a team that will do that, and developing a framework that will help them to navigate that.
All right, and Jacob, as you just manage very many diverse companies, as you've explained, we have political affiliations or groups or political parties that you manage, also maybe the transport sector, entertainment. What is the one thing that all of these different sectors share in crisis communication that you can say, okay, this is one thing that someone needs to have in order for them to have a clear form of communication?
So one thing they share is the potential to sink on a crisis. You see, like right now we have the political instability and both sides are in crisis. No one knows how to go about that. Though we are not into political crisis comms per se, we do most for governments, the NGO sector, and multinational or national blue chip companies or private sector. But you find that when you don't envision the kind of crisis that can hit you, then you're already in a crisis. So all of them have one thing in common: crisis will come. It's just a matter of when, but it will come. Some other crises are quite unique and specific. You have other institutions where you may think you're a small business, but are you taking care of your mental health, for example? Because there's pressure. You have the tax issue to be handled. What measures do you have in place to resolve those? So every of those entities that you've mentioned have to sit down and ask themselves, what crisis can actually befall us? If there was a terrorist attack, for example, how would it affect your business? If there was Mandamano, how would it affect your business? Like for us, I remember just pre-COVID, a crisis hit our business where the business was just down. And then when COVID came, there was the issues of curfews. So how did we navigate that? We had to shift our business model and say, hey, we don't have to just operate in Kenya. There's Africa to be taken over. And that's how we sent our tentacles round. Now we are doing communication support in Somalia, in the Gambia, in ECOWAS region, in South Africa. We have presence in all these regions. So when there's curfew here in Kenya, it's not there in Somalia. It's not there in the Gambia. It's not there in South Africa or Zambia. So business still continues. So if a business doesn't envision how a crisis and the impact it's going to have on them, then they're going to be caught flat-footed. So that is the first thing we do with all our clients. We sit down and come up with the crisis scenarios and actually enlist them.
Okay, even as we now wrap up the conversation, let's say someone wants to start a business and they come to you and they say, okay, I want to start a business, and the business is maybe on this and this and this and this, and on a maybe just any sector within Kenya. What are some of the steps that someone can follow, and so that at least someone who is watching can know, okay, if I want to start a business, this is the thing. When I go to these people, this is what I'll get.
So the first thing would be just to do something called a SWOT analysis, where you analyze the strength of that business idea that you have, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, and what are the threats. If you find many entrepreneurs make the mistake of being so in love with the idea that they are out of touch with what the market would tell them. Because at times you may have all this sentimental value with ascribed upon the idea that you want to pursue, but the market is not ready, or the market will not receive it as you want. The market will tell you, hey, instead of doing this, tweak it this way. Are you ready to make that adjustment? And then there's something called the USP, your unique selling point. You have to have a unique selling point before you pursue. If you don't do a SWOT analysis and you don't have a unique selling point, you are a crisis waiting to happen. So you really have to start with those two. And then as you continue pursuing, ask yourselves, what are the statutory barriers that you can encounter? What are the basic bare minimum requirements, technicalities that can make you lose out on business or get business? And once you've ironed all of those and you have a vehicle that exists, then you're ready for the market.
All right, thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us your expertise. All right, that is Jacob Ouma, who is the Managing Director at Media Communications Limited, just giving us a perspective and also the ideas that you need to have in order for you to run a successful business. All right, let's move on. Kenyan fashion brands have in the past faced credibility challenges, with some questioning their quality and appeal. Over time, the industry has been gaining its credibility, but is it a worthwhile business venture to pour yourself